I want to say, first of all, thanks to D6 and all that they have done over these last several years and all that they are doing and are going to do to bring the church and the family together. I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church help the family. Because as the family goes, so goes the nation. And almost all the ills in our nation can be traced to the fact that our families are fractured. So I am deeply, deeply grateful for what they are doing. Well, it's two things that I hope will happen in the brief time that I have with you. One is I hope that as church leaders, you may pick up with some idea that will be helpful to you in your ministry as you seek to help families. But my second desire is that perhaps there will be at least one thing that you might see that will help you in your own parenting or grandparenting, as the case may be. You know, a number of years ago, I began to think more seriously as I got older that we've got to start younger. We've got to start earlier if we're going to make an impact on the next generation. So I first thought in terms of marriage, and I realized that we spend anywhere from 2 to 10 years getting ready for our vocations. And we have 3 or 4 sessions with a pastor getting ready for marriage. And I thought, no wonder we're more successful in our vocations than we are in our marriages. Now, we've been talking and doing premarital counseling for a good while, but most of that premarital counseling is done in the last few weeks before people get married. There's a whole lot of stuff that they can learn earlier. So I wrote a little book called Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Got Married. And when I speak on college campuses, I say to them, the time to prepare for marriage is not after you get engaged. The time to prepare for marriage is now. If you ever plan to get married, there's some things you ought to learn. So read this book now. You may not even be dating. Read it now. Read it again when you start dating. Read it again when you think you might want to get married to this person. Read it again when you're engaged. Read it again after you get married. And I think you'll make it. And after I wrote that book, I thought, you know, the same thing is true with parenting. Most of what we do with parenting is geared after the people have children. And so we have classes for parents and do things and teach them how to disciple their children. But shouldn't we be backing up and doing a lot more before they have the child? So I wrote a book called Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Became Parents. And I asked Dr. Shannon Warden to join me because she is a professor of counseling at the Wake Forest University in North Carolina, where I live. And she also has 3 children still at home. So I wanted to have somebody that's still feeling the pain and the joys as I was looking back. So this book is 12 things that I wish I'd known before we became parents. And I'm going to run through them with you just briefly, and I'm going to kind of focus on, 2 or 3, 4 of them with our time today. So here we go. First one, I wish I'd known that children radically change your schedule. You know, before we had our first child, my wife said to me, you know, honey, I really would like to stay home with the baby when the baby comes. And I said, well, okay, babe, that's what you want to do. I'm happy with that. And so I thought to myself, I was a pastor of a little church, and I thought, that's good, because I won't have to change my schedule very much. You know, I mean, wife's going to be home all day. She can sure take care of the kid, you know. Won't make much for me to do. I was really, really mistaken about that. You know, she wanted a little help when I got home because she'd been with that baby all day. And so I didn't realize it was going to change my schedule. You know, everything was a whole lot easier when the baby was in her womb. that didn't affect us too much. I mean, she had a few sickness in the mornings, but other than that, and she wanted a few more banana splits, but that wasn't hard either. We could drive together and get the banana split. It was pretty easy, But when that baby came, man, that just changed everything. And so I like to say to husbands and wives, before you get this baby, now you need to realize and you need to be thinking about how you're going to change your schedule, because you can't do everything you've always done. And we have to recognize our limitations. And so I say to guys, look, if you think that when this baby comes that you're going to still be able to work out in the gym every morning for an hour, and then you're going to play golf every Saturday, and you're going to work on your computer every night, you better hold off right now and begin to look at your schedule, because you can't do all those things. And we're going to have to change some things once we get the baby. So we talk about that in the book. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that. Second, I wish I'd known that children are expensive. Now, to be honest with you, when I got the invoice from the hospital on our first baby, which happened to be a girl, it was $9. $9 for the baby. Of course, I was only making $4,000. This was a long time ago, okay? But you know what they tell us now? That from birth to 17, it'll cost you $250,000 to raise that child. That's not counting college. That's just getting them through high school. And some of you folks are real good in math. You've already figured that out. That's $14,705 every year for the baby. So before you have a baby, while the baby's coming, you need to get your budget out. You need to look at your budget again. And if you don't have a budget, then this is the time to get a budget before the baby gets here. See what you're already doing and how you're already using your funds, and realize we're going to have to do some changes here. We're going to have to switch some things. And this is where creativity becomes really, really good. And you're going to have to be creative if you're going to live within your means, which is another idea that's very biblical and not very American. Live within your means. And so you're going to have to be creative about this and think about finding a friend that has a baby 1 year older than your baby who can pass the clothes along to you. Yeah, that's going to help you a whole lot. That's one of the advantages of having a whole lot of children. You can just pass the clothes down yourself. So it's going to be expensive, and you're going to have to change some things. You're going to have to be creative. And it's not just expensive in terms of money, but it's expensive in terms of energy. And so one of the things I'll just throw out to you briefly, I'd suggest that you decide pretty early on that as soon as the child starts sleeping through the night, and as they get a little bit older, that you set their bedtime for 7 o'clock every night. If they go to bed at 7 o'clock every night. And children will do what you tell them to do. They'll go in there, And now, when ours got to be 6 years old, we moved it back to 7:05. Gave them 5 more minutes. And every year we gave them 5 more minutes. So when they get to be 12, and now they go to bed at 7:35. Yeah, but it's still good for mom and daddy. So we have to be creative, both in energy and also in money. And then I wish I'd known that no two children are alike. And yet, isn't that what we do? We compare our children with other people's children, or with our second child with our first child. And our first child was really easy to raise. I mean, really, she slept 18 hours a day from the very beginning. In fact, I'd go in to check on her to see if she was still alive. And then we had a son, and he thought sleeping was wasting time. And they were just totally different. The two children were totally different. And, I wondered after our first child, why do people have trouble parenting? This is easy. The girl just does whatever you tell her to do, It was just fun raising her. And my wife wanted to have 5 boys. Before we got married, she said, I want 5 boys. And I was in love, so I said, fine, babe, we have 5, that's fine, So we had the girl first. In fact, whenever I went in the room when the baby was born, the girl was born, and my wife looked up and said, honey, it's a little girl, but I couldn't help it. And I said, honey, you're the one that wanted the boy. I'm happy with the girl. And then we had our boy. And about 2 years into that, she said, you know, honey, I think one of each is probably enough. No two children are alike. And then I wish I'd known that potty training is no laughing matter. I frankly never thought about potty training before we had a baby. I mean, I knew it happened, but I never thought about it. But a few months in, I said to my wife, how long do we have to do this? I mean, when does this baby start taking care of themselves? You know? And so I'm not going to talk about that one because it's kind of messy. So, but give a bunch of stuff in the book on that one. You know. Wish I'd known that children need boundaries. Have you noticed that for the most part, parents are older than children? And there's a reason for that. With advanced age, there's more wisdom. And so God has given us the responsibility to set the boundaries for children. Now, culture helps us. You know, the first boundary that a child has to face when they leave the hospital is they have to go in a car seat. I mean, the law requires it. They have to go in a car seat. And that's the first boundary. But we have responsibilities for boundaries. But let me just give you 3 ideas on rule setting. 3 ideas on setting boundaries. Number 1, be intentional. Think about it. Think about it. Don't just do it because your parents did it. You know, when our children were little, we had a rule that you couldn't sing at the table. And one day my wife, who's a musician, she said to me, honey, she said, why do we have that rule that the kids can't sing at the table? And I said, well, my mom and daddy told me we shouldn't sing at the table. She said, well, my mom and daddy told me we shouldn't sing at the table. She said, but why? She said, we're Christians, and music is joyful. And why shouldn't the kids sing at the table? And I couldn't think of a good answer, so we just dropped that rule. Now, we did keep the part that you can't sing with food in your mouth. We kept that one. So be intentional. And second, let it be mutual. Let's us talk about it. Let's make these decisions on what the rules are together so that we can both support each other. And if we can't agree, then let's find something we can agree on. And then they ought to be reasonable. Whereas we ought to have a reason for it. For example, here's some good guidelines. Does this rule keep the kid from danger? That's a good rule. Does this rule teach the children some positive character trait? Does this rule protect property? Like putting the bicycle back in the garage. If you ride it, put it back in the garage. That's protecting. That's good. Does this rule teach the child responsibility? Does the rule teach good manners? And the rules should always be explained to the child. And also, whenever you make a rule, you should also go ahead and decide what the consequences are going to be if they break that rule, so that you will know, each of you will know what's going to happen if the child breaks the rule, and the child's going to know. And now, you're not likely to be influenced by your emotions so that you overreact and give them $100 worth of punishment for a $5 crime. So let's just say that you make a rule that we don't throw the ball in the house. And if you do throw the ball in the house, then it has to go in the trunk of the car for 2 days. And if you break anything, we'll have to pay for it out of your allowance. Now that's a good rule, and those are good consequences, and everybody knows what's going to happen. So little Johnny breaks the rule one day and throws the ball in the house and breaks the vase, and so what are you going to do? It doesn't matter whether mama's at home or daddy's at home, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say, Johnny, honey, I'm so proud of you. You know, you seldom break the rules, but you know you broke the rule. Remember the ball in the house? And remember what the consequences are? What are they? Ball has to go in the trunk of the car 2 days. That's right, honey. And that vase, I don't know how much it cost, but where are we going to get the money to do that? It's going to come out of my allowance. That's right, honey. And I hope it doesn't cost too much because I love you so much. And I'm so proud of you because you seldom break the rules. Now let's go put the ball in the trunk of the car. Yeah, see, little Johnny knew what was happening. He knew what was going to happen. And little Johnny will not throw the ball in the house again the rest of his life. That's the way we handle it. We love them, but we also let them suffer the consequences. Incidentally, that works wonderful with teenagers. Yeah, let them suffer the consequences. Number 6, I wish I knew that children's emotional health is as important as physical health. Now, I know that physical health is fundamental. If you don't keep them physically healthy, then they're going to die. You've got to have physical health. But emotional health is extremely important. And it all begins with what we call attachment. And that's why that emotional bond between mom and dad is so important. And that holding the child and talking to the child and singing to the child and all of that, mom and dad, it builds a bond between those parents and that child. Few things you can do more important in the early days than building that emotional bond. And then I'm just going to mention the emotional need of feeling loved. Now, you didn't think I'd speak and not mention the 5 love languages, did you? You know, the question is not, do you love your children? The question is, do your children feel loved? And you can discover a child's love language by the time they're 4 years old. Just observe their behavior. My son's love language is physical touch. When he was 4, I would come home, he would run to the door, he'd grab my leg, he'd climb all over me. He's touching me because he wants to be touched. Our daughter never did that. Our daughter would say, Daddy, come into my room, I want to show you something. She wanted my undivided attention. She wanted quality time. So you learn the child's primary love language, and then you sprinkle in the other 4 because we want them to learn how to receive love and give love in all 5 languages, and I'll guarantee you most of us did not get that. We got 1 or 2, maybe our love language, maybe not our love language, and some of us grew up feeling loved and some grew up feeling not loved. And in adulthood, we have to learn how to speak these languages because we didn't learn them as a child. So emotional health, exceedingly important. And then I wish I knew that children are greatly influenced by our model. May I share with you the most sobering question I've ever asked myself? And I ask it many times when our children were growing up. What if my children turn out to be like me? What if they learn to handle anger the way I handle anger? What if they learn to treat their spouse the way I treat my spouse? What if they drive a car the way I drive a car? What if they have the same work ethic that I have? What if they talk to other people the way I talk to other people? What if they handle conflicts the way I handle conflicts? What if they respond to drug and alcohol the way I do? What if they have the same quality of relationship with God that I have? What if they handle money the way I handle money? What if they treat their in-laws the way I treat my in-laws? Or what if they treat their children the way I treat them? If you ever want to have a little checkup, you might ask that question because children are far more influenced by our model than they are by our words. You see, the closer that our model matches what we teach, the easier it is for our children to respect us. And the greater the gap between what we teach them and what we practice, the more difficult it is for them to respect us. I wish I'd known that sometimes parents need to apologize. You know, people have said to me, Dr. Chapman, if you apologize to your children, won't they lose respect for you? No, no, no. They gain respect for you. They already know what you did was wrong. And let's just say that you speak harshly to your spouse in the presence of your children, and they hear you raise your voice and express harshness to your spouse. It's not good enough just to apologize to your spouse that night in the bedroom. It's fine to apologize to them in private, but the next night, when the children are sitting around the table, I suggest you stand behind your spouse and you say to your children, before we have dinner, I need to apologize to you. Last night, I know you heard me raise my voice at your mother or father, and I was very harsh and mean. And a husband should never speak to his wife that way. It's not kind, it's not loving. It's not what Jesus taught us to do. And last night I apologized to your mother, and your mother forgave me. And tonight I want to apologize to you children, because children should never hear their father speak that way. And I'm going to ask you if you can forgive me. You won't have any problem with your children forgiving you if you're willing to apologize. There are no parents who do not sometimes need to apologize. I wish I'd known that social skills are important as academic skills. You see, our society teaches us that the main thing you want to make certain of is that your children get a good education. But can I tell you, there's a whole lot of brilliant people in this world who lose one job after another job because they can't get along with people. So academic skills are important. So how does this look like? Well, it begins with teaching the child empathy, teaching them how to get into other people's feelings, and it starts with understanding their own feelings. And so you give words to the child's emotions. You say, it sounds to me like you're disappointed because you didn't get to go to the store with your father. And so later they can tell you, I feel disappointed. You give them words that go with those emotions, and they learn to understand their own emotions. Then they understand to learn other people's emotions. Then it means in teaching them kindness. It's the central theme. Be ye kind one to another. We teach them to memorize that verse at the very beginning, the early stages, but let's teach them how to do it. Kindness is words and actions that help another person. And then the whole thing of gratitude and teaching them to say thank you. You know, one little exercise that I encourage families to do is just let the whole family in one room and just one by one, everybody say, thanks God for something in that room. I thank God for this chair because that's my favorite chair. I thank God for the lamp so we can see. I thank God for the floor. I thank God. And just let everybody as many things as they can think of. It teaches the children gratitude, giving thanks. Focused attention. Children need to learn how to look at people when they're talking to them. And may I just say this, if you have a phone and you're talking to your child and your phone rings and you answer that phone, you are saying to that child, whoever this is more important than you. Folks, that's what voicemail is all about. Let the phone ring and keep your child's attention, and you teach them to do the same. And then teaching them the common courtesies, and those may be different in each family. And then the skill of anger management. Children need to learn how to handle anger instead of letting anger control them. I have to be honest with you, I didn't think I had much of a problem with anger until I got married. And I didn't have a super problem with anger until I had a teenage son. And God taught me through my son that I had to learn how to handle my anger. Never forget the night we got into it. He walked out in the middle of our argument. And I said, oh God, I thought I was further along than this. And I wept. And I asked God to forgive me for losing my temper with my son. And when he came back in, I said, Derek, I want to apologize to you, son. And I poured my heart out to him. And he turned to me and said, Dad, that wasn't your fault. I started that. And when I was walking up the road, I asked God to forgive me. And I want to ask you to forgive me. That was one of the saddest nights of my life and one of the happiest nights of my life. And I said to my son, let's us both learn how to handle anger. And the next time you get angry with me, you just say, Dad, I'm angry, can we talk? And if I'm angry with you, I'll say, Derek, I'm angry, can we talk? And let's learn to talk instead of yell. And God taught us how to talk. I wish I'd known that parents are responsible for their children's education, and a whole lot of education takes place before they go to kindergarten. And I won't go into all the possibilities of education, but we're responsible for it. I wish I'd known that marriages do not thrive on autopilot. When we get children, remember, marriage has to be central. Never forget the day a man sat in my office and said, Dr. Chapman, I've lost my wife. I said, really? I didn't hear about that. He said, I don't mean she died, Dr. Chapman. I mean we had a baby. And she spends all of her time with a baby. And I've lost my wife. Listen, the greatest thing you can do for your children is to give them a model of a mother and dad that loves each other. And that means you have to be intentional after the baby comes. You have to make time to be with each other. You have to speak each other's love language. And if you do, you're giving them the greatest gift you can give them. I wish I'd known that children can bring great joy. You know that verse, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. My children are grown now. My daughter's a medical doctor. She delivers high-risk pregnancies. My son has a ministry to the arts community, he and his wife. They have a little house church, and they reach young people in Austin, Texas, artist-type people that I would never be able to reach. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. I hope that for you.